Welcome to The Nameless. This story is not for everyone, but if you're still here, take a deep breath. Let's begin.
It was 7:14 a.m. when the coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered against the kitchen tile. The hot liquid splashed onto my socks, burning my ankles, and "Everybody Wants to Rule the World" by Tears for Fears was playing on the radio in the living room. I cursed, grabbed a roll of paper towels, and knelt down to clean it up. That's when I saw it. Amidst the brown puddle and jagged white ceramic, there was a small gray pebble. It was perfectly round, smooth, and dry. It hadn't been in the mug, and it hadn't been on the floor a second ago. I stared at it, a cold knot of nausea tightening in my stomach, because I knew exactly what was going to happen next. In 3 seconds, a car horn would honk twice outside. 1, 2, 3. Honk, honk. I didn't flinch. I just closed my eyes and whispered, "Not again." This was the 4th time I had lived through Tuesday, November 14th. Every single detail had been identical for the last 3 loops. The song, the burn on my ankle, the car horn. But the pebble was new. And in a world where everything was repeating like a broken record, a new variable wasn't a relief. It was a threat. To understand why I was trembling over a small rock, you have to understand how boring my life usually is. I work in data archiving for a mid-sized insurance firm. My days are a blur of spreadsheets, silent elevator rides, and microwave dinners. I'm a creature of habit. I wake up, I drink coffee, I drive the same route, I sit in the same cubicle. When the first Tuesday happened, it was unremarkable. I dropped my mug, burned my foot, went to work, and listened to my boss, Mr. Henderson, complain about quarterly projections. I came home, watched a documentary, and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, my phone said it was Tuesday, November 14th. I thought it was a glitch. I reset the phone. Then the radio started playing "Everybody Wants to Rule the World." I went to the kitchen, poured my coffee, and my hand spasmed. The mug fell. It shattered. At that moment, I just thought I was having massive déjà vu. You know that feeling where you swear you've been somewhere before? It was that, but dialed up to 11. I spent the whole second day in a fog. I predicted the car horn. I knew Mr. Henderson was going to wear a blue tie. I knew the vending machine would eat my dollar bill at lunch. When I went to bed that night, I was terrified, praying that when I opened my eyes, it would be Wednesday. It wasn't. The third loop was when the panic set in. I tried to change things. I didn't drop the mug. I drove a different route. I called in sick. But no matter what I did, the world seemed to rubber band back to the script. If I didn't drop the mug, the cat knocked it over. If I drove a different route, a detour forced me back to the main road. The universe was correcting my deviations. By the 4th morning, this morning, I was resigned to it. I let the mug fall because fighting it was exhausting. But then I saw the pebble. I picked it up. It was heavy for its size, cold to the touch. It felt like granite. I put it in my pocket, cleaned the mess, and walked out the door. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, just like it had 3 times before. I got into my Honda Civic and started the engine. The drive to work was usually the most predictable part of the loop. There was always a red pickup truck that cut me off at the intersection of Main and 3rd. There was always a woman in a yellow raincoat walking a golden retriever near the park. I approached the intersection, my foot hovering over the brake, waiting for the red pickup. It didn't come. The light turned green and the intersection remained empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a deviation, a big one. I drove through the intersection, checking my mirrors constantly. The traffic was lighter than the previous loops. The rhythm of the world was off. It felt like walking down a staircase in the dark and missing a step. I passed the park. I looked for the woman in the yellow raincoat. She was there, but she wasn't walking the dog. She was standing perfectly still on the sidewalk, facing the street, facing me. As I drove past at 30 miles an hour, her head tracked me. Her expression was blank, slack-jawed, and she wasn't holding a leash. The golden retriever was gone. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Okay, I muttered to myself. Okay, things are changing. Maybe the loop is breaking. Maybe this is how it ends. I pulled into the parking garage of my office building. Usually, the gate arm is broken, stuck in the up position. Today, it was down. I had to swipe my badge. Another change. I parked in my usual spot on the 4th level. The garage was silent. Usually, I could hear the hum of the ventilation fans and the distant traffic. Today, it was dead quiet. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air pressure has dropped. I walked to the elevator lobby. There were 2 elevators. In the previous loops, the left one was always out of order, with a yellow sign taped to it. Today, both doors were clean, no sign. I pressed the button. The right car opened immediately. I stepped in and pressed the button for the 8th floor. The doors slid shut, sealing me in. As the elevator began to rise, I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. No signal. But then I realized the vibration wasn't coming from my phone. It was the pebble. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the small gray stone. It was vibrating, buzzing against my palm like a trapped insect. I almost dropped it. The buzzing grew more intense as the elevator passed the 4th floor, then the 5th. At the 6th floor, the elevator jolted to a halt. The lights flickered. The doors didn't open. I was stuck between floors. "Come on," I hissed, hitting the emergency call button. Static. Then a voice came through the speaker. It wasn't the security guard. It sounded like, Me. "Don't get out on 8, the voice whispered. It was my voice, but it sounded tired, raspy, like I'd been screaming for hours. "Whatever you do, don't go to the desk." The speaker cut out with a sharp pop. Suddenly, the elevator lurched upward, moving faster than normal. It skipped the 7th floor and dinged at the 8th. The doors slid open smoothly. I stood at the back of the car, terrified to move. The lobby of the 8th floor looked exactly as it always did. Gray carpet, beige walls, the reception desk straight ahead. But there was no receptionist. Sarah, the bubbly redhead who was always there at 8 a.m. eating a bagel, was gone. Her desk was bare. No computer, no phone, no bagel. Just a flat, empty surface. I stepped out cautiously. The silence was absolute. No phones ringing, no keyboards clacking, no low murmur of conversation. The office was a ghost town. I walked down the main hallway toward my cubicle. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a low, menacing hum that seemed to match the vibration of the stone in my pocket. I passed Mr. Henderson's office. The door was open. I glanced inside. His chair was turned away from the door, facing the window. "Mr. Henderson?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud, too flat in the dead air. The chair didn't move. I took a step closer. "Sir, is everything okay?" Slowly, the chair began to swivel. I held my breath. When the chair faced me, it was empty. But it wasn't just empty. There was a depression in the seat cushion, as if someone invisible was sitting there right now. Then, the phone on his desk rang. It was an old-fashioned ring, loud and jarring. I jumped. I looked at the phone. The caller ID was blank. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to answer it. It was like a script I was being forced to follow. I reached out and picked up the receiver. "Hello? I told you not to come to the desk," my own voice whispered from the other end. I slammed the phone down. I backed out of the office and ran toward my cubicle. I just wanted to grab my car keys. I had left them on my desk in the confusion and leave. I needed to get out of this building. I reached my row. My cubicle was the third one on the left. I rounded the corner and froze. Someone was sitting in my chair. From the back, it looked like a man wearing a gray hoodie. I didn't own a gray hoodie. He was hunched over, typing furiously on a keyboard that wasn't plugged in. The clack, clack, clack was deafening in the silent office. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling. "Who are you?" The typing stopped instantly. The figure sat perfectly still. "That's my desk," I said, trying to sound authoritative, but failing miserably. The figure stood up slowly. He was tall, unnaturally tall, his limbs slightly too long for his body. He kept his back to me. "Turn around," I whispered. He did. When he turned, I felt my sanity fracture. He didn't have a face. It wasn't that he had a blank face like a mannequin. It was like his face had been erased in Photoshop. just a smooth, fleshy blur where eyes, nose, and mouth should be. And yet, I could feel him looking at me. He raised a hand with fingers that had too many joints, and pointed at the ceiling. I didn't want to look up. The note from the first loop, the memory of a note I never actually saw but somehow remembered, flashed in my mind. Don't look up. But human instinct is a traitor. When something points, you look. I looked up. Above us, the drop ceiling tiles were missing. But instead of ductwork and wires, there was just blackness, a void. And hanging from that void, suspended by nothing, was me. It was my body, limp, pale, eyes wide open and glassy, staring down at the faceless thing and myself. I was wearing the clothes I had on yesterday. The faceless thing let out a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of a radio tuning between stations. Static, high-pitched whining, and fragments of "Everybody wants to rule the world." I didn't think. I ran. I sprinted back down the hallway, past the empty offices, past the invisible presence in Henderson's chair. I hit the stairwell door and burst through it, taking the steps 3 at a time. I could hear the thing behind me. It didn't sound like footsteps. It sounded like wet meat, slapping against the tile, getting closer, faster. Slap, slap, slap. I reached the ground floor and shoulder-checked the emergency exit. It flew open, spilling me out into the alleyway behind the building. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. Traffic was humming on the adjacent street. I scrambled to my feet and kept running, not stopping until I was 3 blocks away in a crowded coffee shop. I locked myself in the bathroom and threw up. I stayed in that bathroom for an hour, shaking, clutching the pebble in my pocket. It had stopped vibrating. Eventually, I built up the courage to leave. I walked home. I didn't go back for my car. I didn't care. When I got to my apartment, it was 2 p.m. I locked every deadbolt. I pushed the sofa in front of the door. I closed all the blinds. I sat in the corner of my bedroom, holding a baseball bat, waiting for the loop to reset. I prayed for the coffee spill. I prayed for the car horn. I just wanted the normal, boring Tuesday back. Night fell. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like those wet, slapping footsteps. I must have dozed off, because I jolted awake when my digital alarm clock clicked. I looked at the red numbers. 6:59 a.m. I held my breath. 7 a.m. was the reset. 7 a.m. came. The radio didn't turn on. Everybody Wants to Rule the World didn't play. I waited. 7:01 a.m. 7:02 a.m. I stood up, my legs cramping. I walked to the window and peeled back the blind just an inch. It was Wednesday. I could see the garbage trucks, which only come on Wednesdays. I saw the neighbor kid waiting for the school bus. Tears of relief streamed down my face. It was over. The loop was broken. I had escaped. I laughed, a jagged, hysterical sound. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, my hands still shaking, but steadying with every second of normalcy. I reached for a mug. Not the world's okayest golfer mug, that one was gone, but a plain blue one. I poured the coffee. I took a sip. It was hot, bitter, and real. I walked into the living room and turned on the TV. The morning news was on. The weatherman was talking about a cold front coming in for the weekend. And now, the anchor said, a bizarre story from downtown. Police are investigating a disturbance at the local insurance firm. My stomach dropped. Authorities were called after a security guard found the office completely abandoned, the anchor continued. There was no sign of the employees, but police did recover one piece of evidence from the scene. The screen cut to a photo. It was a photo of the hallway outside my cubicle. The lights were buzzing, and in the center of the frame, lying on the gray carpet, was a body. It was me. I dropped the blue mug. It didn't shatter. It bounced on the rug, spilling coffee everywhere. I stared at the TV. The body in the photo was wearing the exact clothes I was wearing right now.
And in the dead hand of the corpse on the screen, zoomed in by the news camera, was a small, gray, round pebble. I reached into my pocket. It was empty. A chill went through me, colder than anything I had felt in the loop. I wasn't watching the news. I was watching a recording of what had already happened. I heard a sound from the kitchen behind me. Slap, slap. It was the sound of wet footsteps on the linoleum. "Honey, I'm home," a voice called out. It was my voice. I'm writing this now on my phone, hiding in the closet. The battery is at 4%. The thing that sounds like me is in the living room. It's humming that song. Everybody wants to rule the world. It just stopped humming. It's walking down the hall. I think it knows I'm here. If you're reading this and you ever feel like you've lived a day before, don't try to change it. Just let the mug break. Please, just let it break. The handle is turning.